Hey everyone, welcome back to another Tic Tac Taiko. This week I'm going to talk to you about crossover dependency, what it is, why it's an issue, and how to work past it. Stay tuned. For those of you who may not know what crossovers are, for whatever reason, here are some examples. It's pretty straightforward. The left hand is going across the body of the drum from right head to left head or front head to rear head, while the right hand pretty much keeps a solid downbeat and the left hand is on the upbeats. Crossovers. Crossovers are fun to play, at least speaking for myself. They're generally fun to watch, and it's really impactful when you have multiple people playing crossovers. So I want to point out, this video is not about knocking or bashing crossovers in the least. To show you the issue with crossover dependency, I'm going to do a slightly silly demonstration. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Adam. Happy birthday to you. Yeah, that was silly and I exaggerated, but I wanted to give you the feeling that I'm getting watching a lot of these Katsugi Okedo solos in with a crossover. A lot of times a crossover feels stronger, more polished, more impactful than the solo that led up to it. And it's not that the solo can't gradually get there. Some solos do, but it is often feeling like the solo just kind of goes along, maybe some bumps, and then boop, there's the crossover. The crossover kind of becomes the focal point, almost the saving grace of the solo. And that's where crossover dependency comes from. That feeling of, yes, I got my solo, it's strong, I finished strong. And finishing strong is important. I mean, when I teach improv classes and soloing workshops, I talk about having a beginning, middle, and an end. The end is really important. But if the end is the thing that you are relying on to deliver a strong solo, you may have crossover dependency. There is sort of a perpetuated myth in the Taiko community, I feel, that crossovers are the pinnacle of Katsugi Okedo playing, the highest tier, the ultimate form of Katsugi Okedo technique. And I gotta tell you, it's not. For me, the low tier, the entry level, if you will, is learning how to wear the Okedo, how it fits on your body and the strap, and how to strike the drum. That's where we start. The mid tier is where you start to solo, get comfortable expressing yourself, basic movement perhaps, like maybe walking forward and backwards or in a large circle, maybe even just turning in place, and crossovers. That's mid tier for me. And then you get to the final tier, the last tier. This is where you have advanced versions of a lot of the stuff here. Advanced movement, advanced technique, advanced soloing, but not advanced crossovers. There's really no such thing as advanced crossovers. A crossover is its thing. And once you've learned to sort of unlock it, you can get better, but it's diminishing returns really quickly. You might learn to play faster. You might learn to play louder, but that's it. Compared to, say, that higher tier of advanced soloing, learning different ways of expressing yourself, different tones and techniques and moving and figuring out all these things that are available that have nothing to do with crossovers. So if you're thinking crossovers are the pinnacle, you're really losing out on all of the actual growth and amazing opportunities that Katsugi Okedo allows. Now, it's important to point out, not every Katsugi Okedo solo will have crossovers. And not every crossover is at the end or even in Katsugi Okedo solos. But for those solos that do have crossovers, let's separate the crossover from the solo and look at what both of them require. A good solo requires good technique. You want to hit what you're thinking about playing, what your hands want to play, when you want and where. Center of the drum, rim of the drum, the edge, maybe the backside, whatever it is. You need good technique for a good solo. And you need good technique for good crossovers. I mean, crossovers are all about technique. You're essentially trying to play evenly, cleanly, and audibly enough with your right hand keeping downbeats and your left hand moving back and forth, going one direction and hitting the opposite direction, then moving back and hitting the opposite direction. And if you're doing that at speed, it takes really good technique to have good crossovers. Heck, it takes good technique even if you're doing slower crossovers too. A good solo also requires a bit of spectacle or theatrics, or a little bit of spark, pizzazz, whatever you want to call it. Because you can have someone playing a solo that doesn't look like they give a damn, and that's not a very good solo, at least in terms of the audience's point of view. Same goes with crossovers. No one wants to see something like this. No, so a good solo will need a little bit of something. It could be subtle or it can be kind of exaggerated. What else does a good Katsugi Okedo solo need? It needs musicality. And there's a lot of things it could be, but at the very basic level, this means dynamics. The Okedo is not meant to be the loudest instrument. There's a lot of other taiko that'll cut through or overpower this instrument. This instrument can have nuance, and it should. Even if most of the notes you're playing are on the louder side for the drum, you're gonna have quiet notes. You're gonna have notes in between. You can even have rim shots, the ka. There's a lot of options. So a little bit, if not a lot of musicality is required for a good Katsugi Okedo solo. What about the crossover? Not so much. You might try it starting quiet and building up dynamics-wise, but this is not common. For the most part, you're focusing on keeping the notes even, whatever volume it is, which tends to default to as loud as you can play, and it's pretty straight. Da, 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 da. Even when it's fast, da, 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 da. It's just a series of straight beats at pretty much a constant volume. So musicality is not something you need for a good crossover. And what else does a good solo need? It needs creativity. When you solo on any instrument, you might have it prescribed, it's the same way. You might have it improv, totally different each time, or some hybrid, regardless. You are expressing yourself. You're trying to say something, get a message across, invoke a feeling, whatever it is. And you have the opportunity to do that in your solo. Yeah, but for crossovers, it's a crossover. It's not meant to be creative. It's da 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 da. And you can give a little bit of a message by sort of making that spectacle happen, but not so much. Now, I have seen people experiment with crossovers to try to make them more creative, but two things generally happen. First is the thing they're trying to do is too subtle, and it's lost. It's lost in the da 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 whatever's going on. And two, it actually works, but it detracts from the impact of the crossover. The crossover is no longer as exciting or driving as it could have been in pursuit of creativity. So in general, creativity is not something that's important to a good crossover. So if we look at these two lists, it's pretty easy to see the solo requires a lot more effort, a lot more skill, and it's something that you'll always be able to improve on. Whereas the crossover is sort of its own thing. I'm not saying that crossovers are easy. We're all going to struggle to some degree to figure out how to get things to work in the right way. But in general, once you've figured it out, once you've unlocked it, that's kind of all there is. You don't have to worry about creativity. You don't have to worry about musicality. And those are things that offer a lot of opportunity and growth. They're more of a challenge, really. And something that I realized when I was planning this video, I've seen a countless number of Katsugi Okedo solos that ended with a crossover. I cannot remember a single crossover at this point, except for maybe the ones I've seen on video like 900 times. But the ones I've witnessed live or even on YouTube or whatever, they're all a blur. After you see a couple dozen crossovers, you've seen all the crossovers. but I can tell you about a lot of different Okedo solos that I remember. Maybe not the entire thing, but there was that one time where I saw that person do that one really cool thing I never thought about before. When they play that rhythm, that still kind of haunts me, like, boom, blew my mind. How do they do that? Those are the things that I'm inspired by. Crossovers, they're cool and all, but they're just crossovers. So let's say you self-diagnosed and you have crossover dependency. Well, we can work on that, but I have some good news and some bad news. The bad news is I can't tell you what else to play. I can't tell you you should do this and then that and maybe some of this in order to wean yourself off of depending on crossovers. The good news is that I'm going to show you how I do my Katsugi Okedo solo practice. I dedicate a chunk of time when I do it, and I go through 3 different types of solos, almost always in the same order, and that has helped me A, identify when I have crossover dependency, and B, to work past it. And those 3 versions are front solos, side solos, and hybrid. Front solos are when I take the right hand side, the side closest to my right hand, and have it facing forward the audience. I have both of my hands, both of my bachi, on that side, and they stay there. I never cross over with the left side. This front side solo has some really interesting aspects. It forces me to have good technique, musicality, and creativity, because I'm just standing here. All I have is what's going on here. Visually, there's not a lot going on. It's basically maybe this motion, maybe a little bit of this motion, that's it. It's not that engaging visually. So it means I have to make up for it with musicality, with what I'm playing. And yeah, a little bit of what's going on here, but still, this is going to be the star. So how do I play something interesting musically? Well, you just do it. You practice a lot. Sometimes I'll do measures of 8. 1, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then maybe I'll do measures of 16. And sometimes I'll just do it for 5 to 10 minutes at a time. I'm not worried about how it ends. I'm just exploring whatever might come out. I'm building my repertoire. So the front side solo can feel very limiting, but actually the more you practice it, the more comfortable it is, and the more you're able to do something that the audience will enjoy. And the front side solo in a lot of ways is the hardest to do if you're planted and you're staying solid, because it's really easy, it's really tempting. Just grab the drum, hit the front head with one hand and run around and jump and spin. And I've done all kinds of things, and it's fun to do, but I found myself relying on that sort of distraction and not building up my musicality, not building up my patterns and my techniques. And it was hard for a while to stay there and deliver something I thought was really good. But after a while, this has become really comfortable, and if I want to distract, I can. But much like crossovers, there's a point where you hit where you're not really going to get better. When you're here, you'll find yourself constantly improving if you spend time here on the front solo. For the side solo, I have the side of the drum facing the audience. I'm going to have my right hand on the right head, left hand on the left head, and I'm not going to cross over. I'm going to keep them isolated away from each other. This solo has a little more visual real estate. I've got this to work with. Maybe I could even flap my wings a little bit, but generally there's still not a lot for the audience to see, so you have to rely on what you play. If you have a drum with 2 different tones, whether it's low-high or high-low, you can actually have some fun with the musicality. However, there's also a limitation. If I play something fast and intricate on one head, it doesn't necessarily sound as good split onto 2, like this. Now, technically, that was played well, but having everything on one tone, that kind of a feeling versus 2 different notes, at least for me, it gets very muddy. It loses something for me. So that's why I practice the side solo, because I have to think of the musicality in a very different way with 2 very different techniques. That being said, this does lend itself to some things that you don't do on the front head, like providing your own downbeat. And can hit both at the same time and it's kind of fun. You wouldn't necessarily do that in the front head so much. I mean, try it and you'll see what I mean, but different things work on different types. Fronts and sides lend themselves to different techniques, musicality, creativity, etc. And that's why I isolate that one and this one. And then we have the hybrid variation. Now, on the surface, it's pretty easy. I can play anything that I do on the side, anything that I do from the front, and sort of anything along this arc. But it's more than that. There's actually two focal points when I play hybrid. And one of them is the transition from one position to the other. So for example, I can play side from here. So how do I move my drum to get to this position smoothly while I'm still playing? And what if I'm in this position? It's kind of 45 degrees. Or what if I'm playing here and I want to play the rear? What if I'm here and I want to play the front? It's transitioning, it's moving, it's figuring out where my hands and feet want to be. And you can do it very actively, like you're moving a lot, or you can do it sparingly. Move to a spot and wait, move to a spot and wait. So let me show you an example of the transitioning part of the hybrid solo. Other aspect the hybrid solo focuses on is crossing over, not crossovers, I want to be very distinct about that, but literally having the freedom to cross my left hand over when I want to hit the rear side, especially when there's a different tone from the front. So it might look something like this. These are the three types of solos on Katsugi Okedo that I practice, like I said, generally in that order. I isolate, I do one, then I do another, I do another. Sometimes I have length in mind, sometimes it's free form until I get bored or tired. And then, you know what I do at the very end? I do crossovers. Because they're fun. They're fun. It's just when I'm isolating each of them and I'm focusing on what I can do in each, it makes it so much easier to have material that I'm comfortable with, that I can polish and work on, and so that I do not have, at the end of the day, crossover dependency. I'm not here to say that the way I do it is the way you should do it. But if you don't have something better, now you have a template to follow. So try it. Try isolating the front. Try isolating the side. Try hybrid and see what works. The whole point is not so much how you do it, but finding a way to make the rest of your solo stronger to match what's happening at the end if you have crossovers. And, I mean, you may not have crossovers at all. You'll still have a stronger solo. You'll be more comfortable soloing on Katsugi Okedo than you were by isolating and being more comfortable with all the different ways that you can solo on Katsugi Okedo. Please understand, I'm not here to bash crossovers or to bash people playing crossovers. I think crossovers are fun to play, and I put them at the end of many of my Okedo solos. Also, sometimes it's not a choice. The composer may say, you have to do crossovers at the end of your solo. Let me leave you with one thought and one question. The thought is this: the more time you spend working on the crossover, the less time you have working on the rest of the solo. And the rest of the solo is the overwhelming majority of most of your solo, right? So you have to be strategic. You have to actually look at how much time you're putting into what area of your solo. And the question is this: is your solo solid, entertaining, interesting, whatever adjective you want, without crossovers at the end? When you can firmly say, yes it is, then you have broken crossover dependency. It's not always easy to break it, But first, you have to recognize if you have it. And if you do, that's okay. Now you know how to get through it and how to be better. So, until next time, keep on practicing and be well.